All right. Good evening. Welcome back to Daf Yomi's Wings and Beer Night. Wings and Beer Night is a big tradition. Usually that's a Rosh Chodesh thing, but not this time. This time it is sponsored by Rabbi Yehuda Greenwood, who is sponsoring Wings and Beer in honor of last week's Rosh Chodesh and his birthday, which is tonight.
Happy birthday.
Tomorrow, the 7th of Kislev. Bin 120 Jahre. Okay. Daf Yomi for the week, though, is sponsored by Shmuel and Miriam Fuchs, Nishmas Miriam's father, Henoch ben Yaakov HaKohen, Zichron Levracha, whose yahrzeit is tonight and tomorrow, the 7th of Kislev. And Daf Yomi for the week also continues to be sponsored by Ryan and Tali Bernkoff, Le'ilu Nishmas, Tali's grandfather, Meir Zev ben Yitzchak HaKohen, Zichron Levracha, whose yahrzeit was on the 5th of Kislev. And Daf Yomi is also sponsored this evening by my father, Mr. Loiterman, Le'ilu Nishmas, his maternal grandfather. That's my grandmother's father.
Right.
My grandmother's father. Simcha ben Aryeh, my brother's named after.
So your great-grandfather.
Yes, my great-grandfather. His yahrzeit is tonight and tomorrow, the 7th of Kislev as well. So very special day, illuminating as we are in Kislev. We are at the new Mishnah on Daf Samech Tes Amud Aleph, very bottom of the page. And the Mishnah goes as follows. Malak v'nimtzeis treifa. The Kohen does malika. They open up the bird and they find out that the bird is treifa. Okay? So they're doing the chatas ha'of, the bird chatas, and now the bird is a treifa. We said treifa is that it has some kind of a wound inside, internal wound, that makes it so that the animal is terminal, and that makes the animal not kosher. Often it's a injury in the lungs that's very common, and so treifas are when we have with the opposite of a treifa is a glot animal, glot kosher, and glot means smooth, right? Because the lungs were very smooth. When you feel the lungs to be able to verify that there's no treifa. If it's got any sores or any blemishes on it, then that was something to be avoided because it wouldn't be clear whether there was some kind of hole that was small or imperceptible. But here, this is actually treifa. Rabbi Meir says, "Einu metame bebeis habliya." Rabbi Meir says that in that circumstance, the malika is valid. Therefore, it is a treif animal in that it is you can't eat it, right? But it doesn't cause tuma when you eat it because it's not a nevela. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda says, nope, it is going to create tuma. Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, why is it that he says that it's not going to create tuma? Because there's a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer, he says. Im nilas behema she mitama b'mago b'masa. What is the rule by an animal that is not shechted properly? So it is now able to transmit tuma by touching it or by carrying it. You can carry something without touching it, right? You put it on a stretcher or something like that.
Or use gloves.
Right? You can use gloves, for example. Correct. So in that circumstance, it causes the transmission of tuma in that circumstance. Shchitasa mitaheres, treifasa mitumasa. If you shecht that animal, you shecht an animal, then the animal is found to be a treifa, so then that is not a tummy animal, right? Does not transmit tuma. So then nivlas ha'of, when it comes to the nevela of a bird, she'eno metame b'maga masa, it has less transmission of tuma, right? It doesn't transmit tuma just by touching it or lifting it. Its tuma is only when you swallow it, right? Eino din shete shchita so mitaheres treifa so mituma so. So then for sure, if you do shchita to a bird, so then that's going to remove the tuma that would be applicable if it was in fact not slaughtered properly. So now he says, let's go from there to the next step. Now, once we've known that if you do shchita to a bird, that it's going to remove the tuma, even if it's a treifa. So mamatzinu. So we're going to now compare two things and say they are the same. B'shchita so shehi machsharta la'achila. mitaheres treifa so mituma. So what do we see? We see that when it comes to shchita, which permits the bird to be eaten, and what is it that shchita is able to accomplish? Shchita is able to remove the tuma. So therefore, also af malika. So malika serves the same function as shchita, in that when you do malika to a chatas ha'of, you do malika to a bird chatos, it makes it so that you can eat it. Shehim machsharto bachila, since you can eat it. So therefore, it stands to reason to taher treifa so midei tuma so. It's going to remove the tuma from a treif version of the bird. Okay, so that's his. He says basically malika is the same thing as treif as shchita, and we know that shchita removes tuma. To which, okay, and Rabbi Yossi says, Daya kinvilas behema shchita samitarta velo milikasa. Rabbi Yossi says, well, that's a little bit of a stretch. We understand that shchita can remove tuma when it comes to an animal. Therefore, we'll buy that shchita is going to remove tuma when it comes to a bird. But there's no such thing as malika by an animal. If you do malika to an animal, that's not going to remove its tuma, right? It's still going to be tameh because malika doesn't exist by an animal. So therefore, that's going to be the same thing by malika of a bird, right? It's not going to transmit. It's not going to remove its tuma. Okay, so that is how Rabbi Yossi questions it. Okay, says the Gemara. What are we suggesting then? Rabbi Meir doesn't listen to Rabbi Yossi's point. Rabbi Meir does indeed hold that malika is going to be effective in removing the tuma. So how could he say that? Because Rabbi Meir lo dorish dayo. Is it that Rabbi Meir doesn't learn this rule of dayo? What is dayo? Dayo, Rabbi Yossi again, he says that when you learn a kal v'chomer, the kal v'chomer, even though we say that we're learning that the lenient option must be at least as strong as the stricter item must be at least have the same law at least as much as the lenient item, but it can't have more than that. That's the rule of dayo. It can't be more than that. V'ha dayo d'oraisa, because the rule of dayo, this rule by kal v'chomer, this rule of dayo is a Torah law, d'tanya. Because here's the source for dayo. Here's the brisa says, midin. That's exactly right. Midin kal v'chomer ketzad. So he says, how does the rule of kal v'chomer work? Pasuk says like this: Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, because Moshe wants to know how long is Miriam, who spoke Lashon Hara, how long is she going to get tzaras? So Hashem says to Moshe, Ve'avia yarok yarak befaneha. He says, look, what would be the rule if her father would despise her? So her father would wind up being in a situation that Pasuk says, Halo tikalein. Shivas Yamin, would she not be cut off for 7 days? That would be the punishment. So therefore, we would have a kal v'chomer. Shchina arba'asar yom. If, when it comes to a father, it's going to be a 7-day period that she's going to be excluded, Hashem should be 14. Well, why 14? Because we know that there are partners in creation of a human being, 3 partners, a mother, a father, and Hashem. Well, the mother and father create the body of the person, and Hashem creates the neshama of the person. Essentially, the mother and the father are 50%, and Hashem is 50%. So therefore, if the mother and father 50%, that means the father basically has 25%. So if 25% yields 7, 50% yields 14. So therefore, it should be reasonable to presume that she should be out of the camp for 14 days. Ella, why not? Dayo lavo minadin lios kenidon. The rule is that when it comes to a kal v'chomer, and this is the source in the Torah, this is Torah telling us how kal v'chomers work. The way that a kal v'chomer has to work is that if the source, the father, is 7 days, then Hashem can be no more than 7, no less than 7, but no more than 7. So therefore, however shchita works by an animal, that's as far as it goes. You can't extend it and say that malika also removes tuma by a bird, just because shchita removes tuma by an animal. Shchita removes tuma by an animal, therefore shchita removes tuma by a bird, not malika. So that's a fair point. You can't say that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold, Rabbi Meir doesn't hold of dayo, because everybody has to hold of dayo. This brisa says it's doraisa. So I'm Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Abin. So Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Abin says, Rabbi Meir kra ashkach Vidarish. Oh, I forgot my microphone. Thank you.
I should have reminded you.
Thank you. No. I don't know why. It's like the last 2 days, 3 days, I've just been off with this.
Like a coffee.
Usually very good. Maybe that's what it is. Kra Ashkach Vidarish. He has a pasuk. It's not like we had presumed that it was a straight Kal V'chomer. I mean, the Mishnah makes it sound like there's a Kal V'chomer going here, but really there's a pasuk. Pasuk goes like this. In the parsha of Tuma of Nevela and Shratzim, right? These are the impurities that are transferred by dead carcasses of animals, and also Shratzim, we said, were these crawly creatures that if they're dead, they transmit Tuma as well. Zos Torasa Behema Va'of, pasuk starts off. This is the rule by the animal and the bird. Now, V'chi Be'ezo Torah Shavsa Behema Le'of, Ve'of LeBehema. Now, first question is, you have a rule, single rule, that applies to an animal and a bird. Now, animals and birds, what do you mean they have the same law? They don't have the same law. Behema mitama b'magoma. So we said animals transmit tuma in one way, by touching it or by carrying it. Oaf, eno mitame b'magoma. So birds do not transmit tuma that way. They don't transfer tuma by touching them or lifting them. And oaf, mitame b'godim beis habliya. A bird transmits tuma when you swallow it, creates a tuma so powerful that the clothing that you're wearing also become tameh. However, behema eno mitame begodim abeis habliya. But a nevela animal doesn't cause tuma to your clothing when you swallow it. So they're not the same. So Ella lomar lecha. The Torah compares these two things together in order to tell you ma behema davar shemachshira leachila. Metar trefa sami tumasa, that just like an animal, what is it that's going to prevent the animal from becoming tameh? To eat, that is that something that is going to permit it from being eaten, right? If you do shchita to an animal, that prevents the tuma from occurring. So too, af oaf, same thing is going to be by a bird. Davar shemach shiro be'achila, something that is going to make it permissible to eat. Metahar treva so mituma so is going to remove the tuma from an animal from a bird that is treif. So therefore, that's what he is. What the pasuk that Rabbi Meir is trying to prove, and says that since malika can make your bird acceptable to eat, that's going to remove the tuma from even a treif bird. Okay, so now that's Rabbi Meir's reasoning. So now we heard that Rabbi Yehuda is cholik on Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. And he says that a malika, if you do malika on a bird and it's found to be treif, it's found to be a treifa, so then it's going to cause tuma. So what is his svara for that? So Rabbi Yehuda, my timer, what is Rabbi Yehuda's logic? Why does he disagree? And hold that a treifa that gets shechted or gets malika is still metame bebeis habli, it still creates tuma when you swallow it. So the Gemara says, Kra Ashkach v'Kadarish. He finds a pasuk, and he makes the following drasha. Pasuk says in Vayikra Yud Zayin, V'chol nefesh asher tochal, any person who consumes, and then the pasuk we quote, nevela utreifa. If a person consumes either nevela, which is a unslaughtered animal, non-slaughtered animal that died, utreifa, and that is a animal that has a hole in its lung or one of those injuries that we'll describe in Chulin. So then the pasuk continues, Be'ezrach v'ger v'chi bes begadav. So whether he's a natural-born Jew or he's a convert, he's going to need to wash his clothing, and he's going to go to the mikvah, and he's going to become tummy to the night. Okay, great. So now, pasuk is talking about the nevela of a kosher bird. Then Amar Rabbi Yehuda, treifa lama nemra. So why is treifa included here? Why is it animal that's treifa listed in the pasuk? Because really the rule is nevela, right? If the animal, if the bird or the animal is going to be a nevela, so then the tuma exists. Im treifa chaya. So let's take a look. The rule doesn't apply to treifa. There's only two ways to look at a treifa. An animal is a treifa; it's still alive. So either you look at it and you say, while it's still alive, it has the rule that it is still alive. And so therefore the pasuk says, Hare nevela amura. The pasuk says it's going to be if the
But if I was you, I would.
if a treifa is still alive, so it doesn't transmit any tumah while it's still alive, it has to wait till it dies. Well, once it dies, what is it? It's a nevela. The Torah already said nevela is tameh. So I don't need to write treifa because if it's tameh because if a treifa dies, obviously it's tameh because of nevela. Now, v'im treifa eina chaya. If the rule is that, you know why it's writing treifa? Maybe because even while it's alive, it's considered already dead, right? It's already a dead animal. So then that's not going to help you because harehi b'chal nevela. Then while it's alive, it's a nevela. Either way, the reason why it's tameh is because it's a nevela. Treifa is not a separate category to create tumah. It's the nevela that's the issue. Ella, rather, the reason why the pasuk lists this extra word is lahavi treifa sheshchata shemetama. That is to tell me that even if you do shchita on a treifa, it remains tameh. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita, right? That if you do shchita on a tameh bird, it remains tameh. Sorry, shchita if you do shchita on a treifa bird, it remains tameh. Okay, because the shchita is not going to help you.
Right.
Okay, so that is his rule. Okay, so now
He said Malika.
he said that about Malika, and he says even about we're suggesting that he holds that even when it comes to treifa. Okay, sorry, shchita, right? That also applies, right? So therefore, the reason why he argues that Rabbi Meir says that even Malika is going to help you. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no, even shchita is not going to help you. He only holds that shchita is going to help you remove tumah when it comes to a behema, an animal, but not when it comes to the bird. So now, Amar Rav Shizbi, so Rav Shizbi says to Rabba, El me'ata, if that is true, so then Dichsev, the pasuk says separately in another pasuk. This is in Vayikra Zayin Chaf Daled. It says v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa. If you have the chelev are fats which are not kosher, okay, you're not allowed to eat those fats. If you have the fats of a nevela or the fats of a treifa, so the pasuk says ye'aseh lecho melacha v'chol lo sochluhu. You could do anything you want with them. They're not asr b'hano. There's no prohibition against using them, getting any benefit out of them. The only thing is you're not allowed to eat them. You're not allowed to eat them. So that comes to tell me that the chelev of a nevela, or when I say the treifa is going to be the question also, why treifa? But the chelev, the fats of a nevela, don't transmit tumah. Only the meat of an animal transmits tumah of a nevela, right? So hasam nami. So now what you're suggesting is true, that the reason why treifa is listed is in order to tell me that the shchita does not remove the tumah of the bird. So then let's say the same thing here. Im treifa chaya, if a treifa is a live animal, sorry, nevela amura, then when this treifa dies, so it's just a nevela. So there's no chiddush. Of course, this is telling me the rule of the chelev is going to apply to a treifa because it's a nevela. The im treifa eina chaya, if a treifa is already a dead animal while it's alive, it's not going to live. So then harehi b'chal nevela, and then even when it's alive, it's a nevela. So also, of course, it's going to create the tumah. So therefore, ella. So what is the reason why lahavi treifa sheshchata shechel batohar? So really, what's going on? The pasuk is coming to tell me that a treifa that you do shchita, its chelev is not going to transmit tumah. That's what it's telling me. So now, if that's what the pasuk is telling me, because that's what you told me that treifa means when it came to birds, to tell me that even when you do shchita, it doesn't remove it's not going to remove the tumah. So therefore, even if you do shchita to a treifa animal, it's not going to remove the tumah from the chelev. Miklal dehi mitama. So that means to say that the animal itself is going to create tumah, right? If I do shchita to a behema, so the meat, only the chelev, the pasuk is saying the chelev is not tameh, but the meat would be tameh. So the Hamar Rabbi Yehuda, but we know that's not the rule, because Hamar Rabbi Yehuda said that. Amar Rav, we said the name of Rav, V'amri la b'masnisa tana, and we said it was in a brisa. V'chiyamus mina behema. Pasuk says that when an animal dies, then you are going to become tameh. Miktas behema metama, miktas behema eno metama. So we learn from that part of that we have a circumstance by tumas nevela. Some of the animal can cause tumah, some of it cannot. Ve'ezozu, what kind of animal are we talking about? Zu treifa shechata. This is the treifa that you do shchita with. That treifa is telling me that even when the animal is treifa, if you do shchita, you're going to remove the tuma from the meat, from the chelev, but not from the meat. So therefore, that the treifa, you do shchita. One second, I just said that wrong.
Okay, well, he said,
Right, you've got a behema that you have a behema that creates tumah of nevela, and there's a behema that isn't tamei tumas nevela. So the behema that is tamei tumas nevela is one that was not shechted, and the one that doesn't have tumah is treifa shechata. So Rabbi Yehuda is agreeing that if you do shchita, then it is not tamei. Even if it's a treifa, it's not tamei. So therefore, we have a problem, because why is it that Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that, according to the way that you learned, that the word treifa is coming to tell me that even if you do shchita, the animal, the rule of tuma is still going to apply by the bird. You have to say the same thing by the behema as well. We know that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that way by the behema. Ella. So now what we've got a problem. We basically have two psukim. One that says the word treifa by the birds, and then we have treifa by chelev. So we have to interpret, we're going to have to presume, because it says nevela and treifa, that whatever you do with one, you got to do with the other. The problem is that we need to use the word treifa by the nevela and treifa, talking about the bird. We want that treifa to be extra so that Rabbi Yehuda will learn that even if you do shchita, it still remains tamei. But if that's the case, then that should be also the rule by the chelev. So we're going to have to use the word treifa and chelev a different way so that we don't have a problem. Ella treifa miboile lemeute temeya. So the answer is, when it comes to the chelev, that's the word treifa is coming to tell me that if I have a non-kosher animal, so then this rule of tuma does not apply. Mi sheyesh b'mina treifa. So that's because the pasuk is telling me that the rule of tuma by nevela only applies to an animal where treifa could apply to it, which is yatzasazu she'em b'mina treifa. So a kosher animal can be a treifa. Right? If I have a cow and it has a hole in it, it's a treifa. If I have a non-kosher animal, a rabbit, it has a hole in its lung, it's just still a non-kosher animal. It doesn't become a treifa. It's not a treifa. So therefore, yes, no, put this pussy, whatever. Put this pussycat. Rabbit's not an issue. So hachanami, right? So hachin the tweed bird. That's all. Hachanami lemuute of tamei she'em b'mino treifa. So if that's the case, now you're going to tell me that by animals it's coming to exclude a non-kosher animal. Then go back to the pasuk we tried to use by the bird. How do you know that it's just not telling me that you should exclude non-kosher birds? Why are you trying to exclude a treifa? You should exclude. You should not exclude to tell me that shchita is going to be is not going to invalid is still matame with the shchita, even if it's treifa, when you could just say it's excluding non-kosher birds. So rather, okay. So the Gemara says no. Of tamei l'Rebbe Yehuda. Min nevela nafkale. He says, you know why you don't learn that by when it comes to the birds? Because by the birds, a non-kosher bird, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the word nevela itself excludes non-kosher birds. Titania, we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yochel tehei nivlas of tamei metame begodim abeis abliya. You might think if I have a non-kosher bird that dies without shchita, that it transmits tumah. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, nevela utreifa lo yochal. You should not eat a nevela and a treifa. Misha isura mishum bal tochal nevela. So that means to say that the tumah only applies to an animal where there's a prohibition against eating its nevela. But v'yatzazeh, this non-kosher bird, she'ein isura mishum bal tochal nevela, the prohibition of eating a non-kosher bird isn't because it's not shechted properly. It's ela mishum bal tochal tamei. It's because you're not allowed to eat a non-kosher bird. So therefore, the word treifa is still acceptable. It's still worded back in play. So Rabbi Yehuda's in good shape because of the word treifa is still okay for him to use to make his drasha. So the answer is, okay, well then if that's the case, hai nami typically mechelev nevela. So now you got to go back to the animal and say, where are we excluding a non-kosher animal from? You wanted to say treifa? Well, you just told me that the word nevela removes non-kosher birds from consideration. The word nevela should remove non-kosher animals from consideration. So the word treifa, why is that there? Because after all, we should say that it only is going to exclude animals where the prohibition is eating nevela, where it's v'yatza sazu she'eni surah mishum bal tochel chaylev nevela mishum tame. The reason why you can't eat the non-kosher animal is because it's a non-kosher animal, not because it's nevela. So ella high treifa. So therefore, we're back to trying to figure out what do we need the word treifa when it comes to the chaylev fats of the animals. High treifa mi boy la suye chaya. The answer is it's coming to tell me about a chaya. There are two types of animals. We have a behema, those are the domesticated animals, and then we have a chaya, the non-domesticated animals. They both could be kosher. Deer are non-domesticated. Cows are domesticated. A cow is kosher, a deer is kosher, but the difference is that when it comes to deer, then the chaylev, the fats, those chaylev fats, those are permitted to eat. Right? Those are prohibited. So therefore, we're going to need to include to tell me that the chaya, even though the meat of a chaya has the same rules as the cow, right? And it's going to transmit tumah. The chaylev doesn't have the same rules as the chaylev of a cow. Why? Because the chaylev is meat, right? According to for a chaya, the chaylev is also meat. So maybe it should be also tameh, just like the meat of the chaya is tameh, because you can eat it. So the chaylev should be tameh. So therefore, this is coming to tell me that by a chaya, even though you're allowed to eat it, it's still going to be, it's not going to have, if it dies as a nevela, it's not going to transmit tumah anyway, because chaylev never does. I would have thought that said, that the rule, that the reason why chaylev is not tameh after the animal dies is because the meat this would be an animal where the meat is permitted to eat, because that's going to be tameh. But the chaylev is not tameh because you can't eat it. Yatzazu shechel b'b'sara mutter. But if you've got a chaya, a deer, or a moose or something like that, right? Moose have hoofs, right? Yeah. Moose are kosher.
Are they?
I don't know.
I was just wondering the same.
They try to moose. Yeah, it's split hooves, right?
I never knew that.
Right? I don't know, moose, right? If they have split hooves and chew their cut, you will let us know in a moment. So yatzazu shechel b'sara mutter. So it's chaylev and meat are both permitted, and so therefore you might have thought that the prohibition of nevela, the tumah of nevela, yes.
Yes, moose are technically kosher because they have cloven hooves and chew their cut.
There you go.
Meet the requirements of land animals in the Jewish dietary law. However, moose meat is not commercially available as kosher because it is a wild animal that cannot be properly slaughtered and prepared according to halachic standards.
All right. I'm not sure why.
These like Masora issues, like we didn't.
No, because birds you have Masora issues and things, but the turkey birds you have that issue, right? But not by animals, right? In honor of Thanksgiving tomorrow. Yeah, it should be fine.
Even deer are technically speaking wild and they're kosher.
So therefore, Kamash Malon. So therefore, the pasuk is telling me treifa that this is not the case. Rather, as long as there's a prohibition, since chaya has a problem of treifa also, because it's a kosher animal, right? So even if it dies as a nevela, the chaylev is not going to transmit tumah. Okay, so Amar Lei, so he said, so therefore now we have a rule. Now we have a rule what to do with that treifa, with that word treifa by the chaylev, which is good. Now everything is all back in good shape. So the Amar Lei, so he says back to him, how can you say that the chaylev of a chaya that dies is still tahor, doesn't transmit tumah? Maishna temeya, what is the rule by a non-kosher animal, right? It's chaylev is kosher. Why? De'ein chel b'choluk mibsara. The reason why, if I have a non-kosher animal, the chaylev of that non-kosher animal is not going to transmit tumah is because it has the same rule as its meat, meaning not kosher. It's all not kosher. So chaya nami. So when it comes to a chaya, ein chel b'choluk mibsara.
the rule is not different by its meat from the chaylev, except that it's the opposite. It is completely kosher, right? And so therefore, this pasuk should not apply to it. And furthermore, haksiv, the pasuk says, v'achol lo tzochluhu. The pasuk tells us that you're not going to transmit tumah. Why? Because you can eat it, right? Or I'm sorry, because you can't eat it. But by a chaya, that's not true. By a chaya, you can eat it. So therefore, we don't want to use the word treifa to exclude a chaya. Elam Rabbi, so Abaye says the word treifa legufei yitzrich. The word treifa is actually coming. It is helpful for the case of a treifa animal. So shalo tomar, we don't want you to say hoel temeya asura mechayim, that just like a non-kosher animal, right, is prohibited, right, that it's from while it's still alive, meaning it's already a non-kosher animal. Non-kosher is a non-kosher animal. Shechita is not going to help you. It's a non-kosher animal. So utreifa asur michayim. So too by a treifa, right? While it's still alive, it's a treifa. Shechita is not going to help you. It's still a treifa. So therefore, ma tmeya chelba tamei af treifa chelba tamei. So just like a animal that is tamei, a non-kosher animal, its chaylev is going to be tamei, right, as opposed to the chaylev of a kosher animal, which is not tamei. This is the chaylev is so treifa chelba tamei. So too, the treifa, the chaylev is going to be tamei. That's why it's listed there. Yeah, but ihachi, if that is true, now we're going to have the problem. That's what the word treifa is coming to tell me. That the word treifa is telling me that the chaylev of a treifa is still tamei. Ihachi hainami. Let's go back by the word treifa that's written by the bird. And we're going to say that it's going to have to teach me the same thing. Mi boy, we're going to need it to teach me this, it's the same thing. Shalotomar, so that you will not say, Hoel ve'of tamei osur ba'achila, just like a non-kosher bird is tamei, a non-kosher bird cannot be eaten. A treif asur b'achila, and a treif bird cannot be eaten. Ma'of tamei eno tamei, so just like a bird that is tamei doesn't transmit tumah, af treifa in a metama. I might have thought that a bird that's a treifa also cannot be metame. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda can't use that word treifa. The word treifa is necessary to tell me that. The ode, and furthermore, mi ika lemelaf treifa mitzmeya. How could you even learn a treifa from a non-kosher bird? Right? Tameya lo haisul shasa kosher. A tamei bird, a non-kosher bird, was always non-kosher from when it was born. It's a non-kosher bird, right?
Can you be treifa the way you shechted?
Yeah. Shechting doesn't cause treifa, right? Treifa is going to be an injury which is already existing before. Internal organ injury from when before it was shechted. So treifa, haisul shasa kosher. Treifa was kosher for a while, right? It wasn't born a treifa necessarily. And even if it was, v'chitema treifa mi betin, you could have a treifa that was born with a birth defect, congenital birth defect that's going to make it a treifa. Nevertheless, Mike, what are you going to say? Pamina mihaika. In its type, though, it has the type. You can't compare non-kosher animals for all that species are all going to be no good, whereas treifa, that type of animal could be kosher in other circumstances. Okay, so we're not going to use the word treifa for that. So we got to go back to the drawing board and try again. Almost done with it. Ella Amar Rava. So Rava says.
Right next to you.
Yeah, that's right. Ella Amar Rava. Rava says, Torah HaTorah Amra Yavo Iser Nevela v'Yachul al Iser Chelev Yavo Iser Treifa v'Yachul al Iser Chelev. Rava suggests as follows. He says that usually in the there's going to be a machlokas of something called Iser Chal Iser. When something is prohibited, can you have it prohibited a second time? Something new happened to it that makes it prohibited for two things. So can I eat it once and get liable for two separate averos? That's going to be a question. Says here, so generally speaking, according to Rabbi Yehuda, generally no. But here, yes. The Torah is telling us that this prohibition of eating nevela should come and it should fall on a chelev prohibition. Meaning, I had a chelev which is prohibited to eat of this animal, and then if I don't shecht it, then it's going to become now it's going to be a prohibition of both chelev and nevela.
It's got both. Also, yavo iser treifa v'yachol iser chelev. Also, if I have chelev of an animal which is treifa, of an animal that's chelev, the chelev of a treifa animal, it could have two prohibitions, and that's the point. Utsrichi. Now I need that. Right now, that's not going to be that's specifically by the animal. That's going to still leave the word treifa available for Rabbi Yehuda's point to tell me that tuma is not going to be removed when I do shchita on a treifa animal. And now I need both these cases because the ashma inon nevela. If you told me that this was the rule by nevela, that if I had just nevela mishum dimitamya, because nevela causes tuma, aval treifa, when it comes to treifa, which is not as severe a prohibition because it doesn't cause tuma, emalo, I might think not. The isser of chelev is going to be all that you get. Treifa is not going to fall on it. So therefore, the pasuk is now telling me, no, even when it comes to treifa, you could still have two averos on this chelev. Ve'iash ma'inon treifa, if you told me that this is the rule by treifa, mishum de isura mechayim, that's because the treifa is also while it's still alive, right? However, val nevela is less severe because it is not nevela. It only occurs after the animal dies. So ema lo, I would say not. So therefore tzricha. So therefore this pasuk is telling me that there's two prohibitions. When you eat chelev, it could be a chelev of a nevela, it could be chelev of a treifa, and that makes two separate averos. Okay.
So it can be extra non-kosher.
So it can be extra not kosher. That is correct. And now we understand the source for Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, right? Rabbi Meir holds that if you do shchita on a bird, that's treif. It's not going to. The bird becomes not tamei, right? Because he had learned that from which pasuk was it that he started with, right? He says. We wanted to say it was a kal v'chomer. We decided it wasn't a kal v'chomer. We said that.
But the Rebbe says,
was that what it was? Right? Zos Toras behema. That's exactly right. Zos Toras behema v'ha'of. That was his source. Now, but Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you do shchita to a bird that's treif, and for sure malika to a bird that's treif, then the bird is still tamei. So for Rabbi Meir, who holds that the shchita of the bird is going to remove its treifa status, so hi treifa mayavidle, what does he do with that word treifa? That's Rabbi Yehuda's source. So what does Rabbi Meir do with that? So he answers me, shchita shehi lifnim. He says that if you do shchita on a bird inside the azara, inside the Beis Hamikdash area, so that's going to remove tuma as well. Okay? Because
down here,
it's not just nevela, but also this as well. It's going to remove the tuma from it as well, because it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle shchita. But even though it's a puzzle shchita, it removes tuma.
Because he's in the chatzar.
Because he's in the chatzar, so it's going to be puzzle, right? He's inside the chatzar, so it's going to be a puzzle korban. Nevertheless, a kosher shchita removes the tuma. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda learn that rule from? Treifa achrina ksiv. He has a different pasuk. It says nevela utreifa lo yochel etama ba'ani Hashem. That's in Vayikra Chaf Beis. He learns that rule from that word treifa. And now Rabbi Meir, what is he going to do with that word treifa? Chad lemute shchita shilifnim v'chad lemute of tamei. So the Rabbi Meir says, I need the two times treifa. One time to tell me that if I do shchita to a bird inside the azara, that it's not going to transmit, that there's no tuma. The second one is to tell me that if I have a non-kosher bird, also doesn't transmit tuma. And Rabbi Yehuda, what is Rabbi Yehuda? Where is he going to know both of those drushos from? Since he already used one of the psukim, he says, min nevela nafkale. He says the word nevela itself, as we had said earlier, the word nevela is going to remove non-kosher birds. Right? Nevela says non-kosher birds. As he had said before, that only that which becomes prohibited because it's a nevela, not that which was prohibited because of a non-kosher bird. Now, Rabbi Meir, hi nevela mayavid le. What does Rabbi Meir do with that word nevela? So the answer is, he says l'shir achila bekazayis. The reason why it says nevela is because the pasuk needs to tell me that consuming. The pasuk says consuming nevela is the problem, and therefore, what is the volume of meat that I need to consume in order for there to be a tuma transfer? The answer is
Could be
bekazayas.
like 2/3.
Sorry?
Could be like 2/3 of the meat that you.
No, you need kazayas, right? Because achila, whenever you have a mitzvah of achila or a prohibition of eating anything, it's always a kazayas. That's the general rule. So therefore, since it's telling me that it's a kazayas, therefore tuma is transferred by a kazayas. Now, v'tepakli mikro kama. So why don't I use the first pasuk? The pasuk says v'chol nefesh asher tochal nevelu treifa. Why don't I use it from that pasuk? It says tochal there. Mida'af gerachmana beloshen achila. So after all, it also uses the word eat, consume, so why don't I know it from there? The answer is I need two psukim to tell me not about eating, that the tumah is transferred by eating, to tell me two parts of the eating. One, chad l'shir achila, tell me that you have to eat a kazayas of it, and v'chad l'shir achila b'chdei achilas pras, that you have to eat it in a certain time frame. If you recall, when we eat matzah, we're always trying to shovel it down real fast, right? The reason is because you have to eat a kazayas b'chdei achilas pras, the amount of time it takes to eat half a loaf. So that seems to be a very short amount of time. We're shoving a lot of kazayas down in that amount of time. But that's why it says achila twice. In order for tumah to be transferred, you have to eat non-kosher bird in that volume, in that amount of time. In order for tumah to transfer. About 9 minutes. Right?
89 minutes?
8 or 9 minutes.
Loaves of bread must have been smaller because for us to eat a half a loaf.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But we said because I think that it is with a presumption that a loaf of bread is 2 meals, I think. So it's 1 meal's worth of bread. It's the amount of time it would take to eat one meal. Salka daita chamina. I would have thought to have said hoil vechidashu. I might have thought, look, tuma bebeis habliya. Creating tuma when you swallow a bird there's no other situation where tuma is caused that way. It's a unique situation. So therefore, upon swallowing, it doesn't exist by any other law. So therefore, yoser mikdei achilas pras. I might have thought, therefore, as long as you swallow kazayas, you may have longer to do it in, right? Why did it have to be in that amount of time? So yoser mikdei achilas pras nami l'tami. It should also cause tuma. Kamash malan. So therefore, the pasuk says achila twice. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't seem to need the pasuk to say achila twice. That's ultimately the difference. He says achila, and you assume that it means an achila of a kazayas and bichdei achilas pras.
So what happens once your base of blue becomes tummy? But then what's the nafkamina of that?
When you become a tummy person, so now your clothes have to get washed and you have to go to the mikvah.
Not just it's your whole body.
Your whole body. Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
It's just an interesting way to say it.
That's correct. It's metame bebesabli. You become tame when you swallow it.
Okay.
That's what it is.
How do you make your clothes not tummy? You wash
You put them in the mikvah. Wash them in the mikvah. Dunk them. Kalim can be made not tame by being immersed in the mikvah. Okay.
It comes from the word machshava. Right, it means to think. It's like
Tana Rabbanan, a rabbi's word. Back on this pasuk, v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa. The chelev, these forbidden fats, we'll call them, of a nevela and the chelev of a treifa. So you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do anything that you want with them, but not eat them. So b'chelev behema tahora hakas medaber. This pasuk is talking about the chelev of a kosher animal. So to tell me, right, that you can't eat it, but it doesn't transmit tuma. How do you know that? The pasuk doesn't specify kosher animals. Maybe it means also the non-kosher animals. Also, if a non-kosher animal dies, then the chelev is also not transmitted of tuma. So amarta tihar mikal shechuta. So the answer is because. The pasuk is saying that the way to avoid this animal being tameh is to shchita on it, right? It becomes tihar mikal shechuta. This becomes a shchuta. If you have this type of animal that has shchita on it, it doesn't create tuma. Vetihar mikal chelev. Then it says, not only is that one way to remove the tuma from the animal, but also the chelev is not metame, even if it doesn't have shchita, right? So if you do shchita on the meat, so it's not tame. But if you don't do shchita, the meat is tame, and the chelev is not tame anyway. That's what the pasuk is saying. So ma keshet tiher mikal shechuta tehora velo betmeya. So just like when we're talking about shchita, removing the tuma, so that is a existence, right? That concept of shchita applies to kosher animals, not to non-kosher animals, because it's still going to be. It's not going to make it kosher just by doing shchita of a non-kosher animal. So av kishatir mikal chaylev. So too, when the pasuk is saying chaylev is not going to transmit tuma, so bitahora velo betmeya, it should be talking about a kosher animal, not a non-kosher animal. So therefore, we should be telling you that the meat of a non-kosher animal will remain tameh. Oh, kalech l'derech zu. Or maybe what you have to do is turn it the other way and look at it the other way. Tihar, the pasuk says mikal nevela, right? We're going to say that nevela is not going to transmit tuma by chaylev. To tihar mikal chaylev. One second. Sorry. Tihar mikal nevela. Non-kosher animals are not going to transmit tuma because of nevela. And v'tihar mikal chaylev. And now the pasuk is also telling me that it's chaylev doesn't transmit tuma. Ma shekatir mikal nevela. Just like when it says that when it comes to nevela, it's not. It is only going to be not tameh bitmeya by a non-kosher animal because v'lo b'tahora, but not a kosher animal. A kosher animal that dies without shchita is tameh. Av keshetiyar mikal chaylev. So too, when the pasuk is talking about chaylev not transmitting tuma, that's going to be bitmeya, a non-kosher animal, v'lo b'tahora, not a kosher animal. So therefore, amart. Kesheba b'derech zu he betahora. So kesheba b'derech zu he betmeya. So you've got two ways of learning this pasuk. Either you can come one way and decide that the pasuk is telling me that the chaylev of a non-kosher animal is not transferring tuma, and the other way to look at it is the chaylev of a kosher animal is not transmitting tuma. So mi sheyesh so Talmud Lomar. Therefore, you've got basically two ways of looking at it. So therefore, we need to resolve that. So Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says treifa, b'mi sheyesh b'mina treifa. That's where we said the word treifa. So therefore the word treifa comes to tell me that this pasuk applies to an animal that the concept of treifa applies to, which is kosher animals. Otzi es hatmeya she'ein b'mina treifa. I have to remove from this pasuk non-kosher animals. Pasuk's not talking about non-kosher animals because there's such thing as treifa by a non-kosher animal. V'lo otzi es achaya, and I'm not going to talk about a chaya as we said before. Sheyesh b'mina treifa. There is such a concept of a treifa by a chaya. So Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, "V'achol lo sochluhu." So pasuk says though that you're not allowed to eat this chaylev. So mishachel ba'aser. Therefore, we're going to say this pasuk is also not talking about a chaya. Why? Because it has to be a animal that the chaylev would have otherwise been prohibited. But the meat would be permitted. But yatsa chaya, that would exclude a chaya shechel b'b'sara mutter, that both the chaylev and the meat is permissible. So therefore, if a chaya dies, its chaylev is tameh as well. So therefore, this pasuk is not coming to a non-kosher animal. This pasuk is not talking about that it's chaylev, that it's not going to transmit tuma, and a chaya, even the chaylev is going to transmit tuma. Okay. Amalei Rav Yaakov bar Abba l'Rava. Rav Yaakov bar Abba says to Rava, El me'ata, if what you are saying is true, that the Brisa, right, has decided that there's no tuma of a nevela by a non-kosher animal. That's what we've just concluded. So nevelas behema tahora hu demitama, nevela behemas tmea lo metama. So he says now you've come to the conclusion that the nevela, the carcass of a kosher animal, transmits tuma, but the nevela of a non-kosher animal does not transmit tuma. So Amar le kama sabe shabishtu ba. He says, you've made a mistake, right? Lots of people have made the same mistake. And that is, Seifa asan nevelas of tameh. He says, that part which we were talking about, no. A non-kosher animal, that is going to transmit tumah. What I meant to say when we were talking about the non-kosher, right, doesn't transmit tumah, that's birds. We're talking about birds. So that is a non-kosher, that we knew that halacha before. A non-kosher bird does not transmit tumah b'beis abliya. Right, but a kosher, non-kosher animal does transmit tumah. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Lo tia Rabbi Meir ella bitmimin." Right, Rabbi Meir says that when you do malika, right, he suggested that when you do malika, that the treifa that is going to be that
The reaction is not that.
is going to the Malika is going to remove the tumah of Beis Abliya by a treifa, that is only betmimin, right? That is an otherwise fit for sacrifice animal, right? Aval bali mumin, but if it has a blemish on it, and now when we talk about birds, we don't have blemishes. We had severe blemishes, right? Missing a leg, dried up wing, or the like. So if that is the case, lo, then that is not going to make it tahor, because. Right. It has to be, the only problem has to be that it's a treifa, right? That's the only issue with it.
Does it avoid it from flying, or
It does, yeah. It has to be a very bad. It has to be almost, we call that like it's missing a limb. For Rabbi Elazar disagrees. He says afilu bebali mumin, that even if there's a blemish, otherwise Malika is always going to help you remove the tumah of Beis Abliya.
Why would you do Malika on a bird in the base of Mikdash if it had a...
Why would you do it? It has a mum on it. Why would you be doing it? His answer is Malika is just effective, right? And Itmar Nami, we even have a statement in the base medrash that goes a step further. Amar Rav Bibi, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Bibi says in the name of Elazar, Mitar hayu Rabbi Meir bebali mumin va'afilu ba'avozim v'tar negolin. Not only is it, if it's a bal mum, the Malika is effective, even if you're doing a chicken or a goose, and chickens and geese are not korbanos, right? Can't never bring a chicken or a goose as a korban. If you do Malika on a chicken or a goose, then that's going to remove also its tumah bebeis abliya.
how about a deer?
A deer is an animal, not a bird, right? So the animal's Malika is not going to help, right? Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to know, though, Araf A's. What if you've got your goat that is your egla arufa. Let's say you've got an egla arufa. It's supposed to be a calf, right? It's an egla arufa, right? You find a body between two cities. You don't know which one it was, so we measure whichever is closer. So they would bring the calf to the valley, and then they would hit it. They would cut it with a knife from the back of the neck. So let's say you don't do a calf. Let's say you brought a goat instead. What would be mahu? What would be the halacha? Is the carcass of this animal now a nevela? By the egla arufa, it's not a nevela, even though you're not doing shchita because you're doing the egla arufa process to it. But if you do the egla arufa to the wrong animal, so does it work? So
No, it's not. How do you know regular egla arufa is not a nevela?
Because the pasuk says it's usher. What was it? How do we know?
You know what I'm saying? You have to understand that we're comparing that.
Just something you know.
The analogy of an animal.
Trying to see where we know that from.
We're
The answer is we're going to know that in a moment, right? That comes up. We don't know that yet, but presume it, and we're going to learn it in a second. So the answer is avazim v'tarna golin taimamai. Why is it that chickens and geese why is it that chickens and geese the malika is effective? Because demino de ofos ninu, because they're types of birds after all. Aval eis, but a goat lav mina de eglo. It's not a type of a calf. Different, right? We have large animals, we have small animals, right? It's a cattle, bucker, and so on. Tzon are small animals, bucker are large animals. It's not, goats are not in the same category. Oh, dilma mina de behema, or maybe it is in the same category, because after all, it's behema. Behemoths are behemoths, maybe. So Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamar li lahashmatz. So Rav Dimi was sitting and he said over this teaching, Amar le Abai, Abai says miklal de egla arufa tahorahi. That means that the fact that you're asking this question implies that an egla arufa itself is not transmission of tumah when it gets killed. So Amar le in, he says, of course, that's what I believe. Amri de bei Rabbi Yanai, why? Because in Yeshiva Rabbi Yanai they learned as follows: kapara ksivba. By the egla arufa, it says that it's an atonement, and kakodshim, which means that it's just like kodshim. Kodshim are also an atonement, and therefore, just like kodshim are not nevela, so too the egla arufa is not nevela. Okay, from the word kapara. Meisev Rav Nasan avua de Rav Huna. So Rav Nasan, the father of Rav Huna, asks the following question: V'achol lo sochlu, right? You're not supposed to eat the chelev of this animal that dies. The chelev of a kosher animal that dies by nevela, it doesn't have tumas nevela, but you're not allowed to eat it. Ainli ela chelev shasar b'achila umuter b'hana. So that's talking about. That means this pasuk is talking about chelev of an animal, because since you're not allowed to eat it, but it's mutter for you to get benefit. That's why it doesn't transmit tumah. What about if you have chelev shel shar niskal? Let's say you have a kosher animal that has another prohibition on it that means you can't get any benefit from it. Like, for example, an ox that kills a person, and now it's going to be stoned, right? We said it was prohibited. We learned in Sanhedrin that we're going to kill that ox, and the meat and carcass is prohibited from any benefit. Also, egla rufa, the carcass of an egla rufa is also prohibited from any benefit. So Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, kol chelev. It means to include all chelev. That means all chelev is not going to transmit tuma of nevela. V'isaka daitach egla rufa tahurahi. Now, if you thought an egla rufa is going to be not a tuma of nevela, so he tahora v'chelba tameh, right? What would you have thought? The chelev is tahor, but the meat is so that the egla is tahor, but the chelev is tameh. That makes no sense because that's reversed. So heicha de'araf mi arif loitzrichalis. You're right. We weren't asking what happens if you actually completed the egla rufa process. Egla rufa process, that's going to make it not tameh. Ki tzricha heicha deshachit mishchat. The question is, you didn't do the egla rufa, you just shechted it. So now it's going to remove the tumas nevela. So what say the shchita is going to remove its nevela? So lo tzricha shemesa. So no, that's not the question because we must be talking about an egla rufa that just dies, drops dead, right? Therefore the shchita is not helping it. Miklau demechai masur. That means that the prohibition, the question stems from the isur hana, which was in place before it dropped dead. So how did it become asur b'hana before it died? So the answer is it does. So we don't know. So when does an egla rufa become prohibited from hana? Rabbi Yanai gvul shemati v'shachachti. I knew when it was, but I forgot. V'nas bin chavraya lemeimar. But the Talmid Chacham said yerida solenachal eson hi osarta. When you take the egla rufa and you bring it down into the valley, that is when it becomes asur b'hana. Then, when it died, it became a nevela. That's why we had the question. But if you did shchita to it, so then potentially that would remove the nevela from it. Okay. Hadron Allah chatasof, hadron chatasof, hadron chatasof. We end that parak.
Boy, that was impressive.
Okay.